If you haven't been noticing it lately, it seems like the West is slowly but surely either being absorbed by Eastern companies, or those same Eastern companies are now abandoning the Western sensibilities that they thought would lead them to riches in the past. And with the announcements I'll discuss here, it seems like what's happening is exactly what I always expected, that the East is officially abandoning the West. So I want to talk Ubisoft, that's Assassin's Creed as such, as well as Square Enix, who does Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and more. I'll be bouncing between the two, but let's first begin with Square Enix. As seen here from Video Games Chronicle, Square Enix has confirmed that they have begun to do mass layoffs specifically targeting their Western departments only, and it's claimed that all areas of Western staff are being affected by this. Takashi Kiryu, that's the CEO of Square Enix, announced this via video call recently. As seen here, it was done to make Square Enix more lean and agile, that's according to Kiryu. Currently, it's not known the exact number of people that have been laid off, although in London at least they do confirm that pretty much everyone who works there for Square Enix is either likely going to be laid off or at least in fear of it happening, but again, that's not confirmed just yet. Although some may say, well, it might just be a few people, right? Actually, it seems according to VGC anyways, as they report right here, that these mass layoffs are actually affecting the entirety of Square Enix's European operations. From brand marketing, communication teams, and more, nobody is safe outside of Japan from these layoffs. And that the money being saved by this, according to VGC, is somewhere near $19 million annually for Square Enix. And according to their CEO, that even though last year Square Enix also laid off people again, specifically only in the West, the restructuring has not worked, which is why we are now where we are. However, it was also confirmed recently that Kate Swinwar, who openly celebrated the passing of Charlie Kirk, for example, this is her on screen by the way, the pink-haired one, which is pretty obvious, I know, was the head of localization for Square Enix and purposely led the localizing of characters like Wook Lamont, who players hated so much in the Dawn Trail expansion for Final Fantasy XIV that is practically tanking that MMO, which was originally, by the way, Square Enix's cash cow, if you can believe it. And we know that Kate is gone from Square due to this going around as seen here, which confirms that Paul Chandler is now taking her position as head translator. Even Asmongold had to come in and make a joke about Kate Swinwar being either laid off or leaving of her own accord. We don't really know. But either way, this does mean that another activist has officially left Square Enix behind now. Of course, Asmongold did speak on Kate Swinwar and what he thought about it, which I think is relevant to the conversation, so please watch this clip.
Final Fantasy, as a new lead translator, Paul Chandler, thank you for your hard work for these past years, Kate. You didn't deserve the harassment Lama Todd and other idiots gave you. Can't wait to see what's coming next. And so basically, they replace this person, and Kate is the English localization manager for Dawn Trail. And so this basically is this woman. I mean, really is no surprise. This is her. And, she's going around talking about doing a purge for the Confederacy. Right. Or for people that she disagrees with publicly, right? And I think this is what people are really fed up with. They're fed up with liberal people feeling like they can just go out and just be openly advocating for violence and racism like it's just normal. I think that's what people are really tired of. Meanwhile, people have been spending 5 years, 10 years getting fired for the same beliefs, right? The mentally ill. Yeah, I think people are just of this, right? And so anyway, this girl goes out and says this. Obviously, a lot of people talk about it. I talk about it. Asmongold calls for Kate Conroy to be fired after reposting controversial political opinions. Asmongold calls for her to get fired 2 months ago, and she got fired. Why would you care someone's opinion on a game dev you didn't even play? I think people just don't want to have people in positions of power or any sort of place inside of society, polite society, that are advocating for a purge of people that they disagree with politically, right? It's really not that complicated. There we go right here. Bottom feeder imagines he's important. Who imagines he's important to the exception of the rule that says there is no extreme controversy. Any decent person knows fascism should never be tolerated. You're absolutely right. And that's why whenever people advocate for purging the people that they disagree with politically, they get fired because fascism wasn't tolerated. Wow. What a big day for me. Oh, it's too bad, isn't it? So all these people crying and coping and, just getting mad about this, yet he talks about you. Yeah, all these people that don't care about me sure seem to know a lot about me. Isn't that interesting? She did get fired, or at least she was let go. I don't know. Maybe she wasn't fired, but she's definitely not at the company anymore. And that's it. As always, welcome home. There it is.
And Asmongold is right. Whether you want to admit it or not, the truth is that these companies cannot stomach or rationalize hiring people who effectively want to ruin the messaging, the goodwill, and the future of these games for solely political reasons. And if you want more content that actually calls out the problems in the industry without sugarcoating it, consider liking the video, subscribing, or becoming a channel member for $3 a month. Thank you. As we all know though, the big elephant in the room for not just Square Enix, but places like Ubisoft and more too, is that their westernized sensibilities used to be about making great games that champion the uniqueness of Western game design. For Ubisoft, go look at Assassin's Creed 2, Black Flag, even Assassin's Creed Origins. These all prove that. But there came a time where the unique and powerful parts of Western game design started to fall to the wayside for these types that Asmongold spoke on, and that they have routinely ruined everything that they touched. It's even more frustrating when you circle back to Square Enix because, obviously, their games are Japanese. And pretty much everything Square Enix has invested into from a Western sense has not paid off for them at all. Take, for example, Marvel's Avengers. As seen here, years ago, that game came out and already it has been delisted and ceased development. You cannot play that game anymore. It was Western slop through and through. I did play it, but that wasn't the end of it either. Square Enix also sold off Crystal Dynamics, which did the Avengers and Tomb Raider, as well as Eidos Montreal, which did the Deus Ex reboot games too. They ended up selling off both of these studios to Embracer Group for $300 million, and I figured those studios would have been worth more than that. But I guess when Deus Ex Mankind Divided flopped and Crystal Dynamics has been making nothing but utter slop for over a decade now, I guess they're just worth what they're worth. But even then, the writing was still on the wall, that the Eastern Square Enix was abandoning the West even then, and even though layoffs are never a good thing financially and culturally, it starts to make more sense. Because the reality is that people buy and play Japanese games because they're made by Japanese people with their culture in them. Duh, I know, it doesn't take a genius. That if you have a Japanese game that's being translated and then changed by some Western person, that it ruins the quality of the game because the Western translators always believe that they're just as much as developers as, say, the game director or the artist who made the game they're translating in the first place. And we also know how hard-headed the West is, because now let's talk about Ubisoft as well. You already know they did Assassin's Creed Shadows, which every website tried to gaslight you into believing was a hit when it wasn't. This is from Tech4Gamers, but they're not the only ones who reported on this, but as you can see, Shadows was actually the lowest selling game across the past 5 entries, and that has been confirmed now. Even though people like Matt Piscatella of Circana claimed that Shadows was a mega hit when it first came out, which even led to IGN reporting back in March 2025 as seen here that, oh, Shadows was a mega hit. Look guys, it sold so well. It did so great, except it didn't at all. And that the usual types that ran defense for Ubisoft claiming that the players who stood against Yasuke and their messaging were the ones in the wrong. When in reality, the players were right, like they always are. The game didn't do well. I actually also got info from some Ubisoft employees recently, and they told me that Shadows has amassed roughly about 6 million players overall. And I say players, that's key, okay? Because that's not just sales. Because again, Shadows could be played via Ubisoft's subscription service day one, of course, too. And I can already hear the apologists claim I'm lying, but again, look at the websites. They are now admitting that the game is flopped too. So what you're defending here, by the way, is a losing battle. Assassin's Creed also was the crown jewel in Ubisoft's cap, but now they have floundered so poorly that Tencent has basically bought them out and created a new studio to shepherd Assassin's Creed and more. Because, let's be real, Western developers can't really be trusted to steer their own ship these days anymore. And it's frankly embarrassing. You think I would be happy about this, but I'm really not, because the West is being treated like they're noisy, like annoying children compared to the East these days. That these developers and the activists are acting more like teenagers who don't even know what socialism or something else is. They're just yelling these sorts of things because they're told that it sounds cool. And then the East is coming in like the actual adults they are, and then shoving these people aside, and they really can't do anything about it because they've made everything they've made so weak now. And it's led to the West West, losing its identity. It's all because by destroying this wave of calculated structure and wording and behavior that they were pushing, then now even Assassin's Creed of all things couldn't win the fight against the cold shivering reality of what this entire industry is becoming. What makes this even more insufferable is how Ubisoft has answered the backlash to Shadows and then some. So GameFile was the origin of the story as seen here, where of course Stephen Totilo, again the same guy, who also recently omitted key conservative voices from his Halo reporting because it went against the narrative, reported on this as well. This then led to other websites like Kotaku, as seen here, referring to this news story as Ubisoft's haters getting pushed back, or even Games Radar with their article titled, Assassin's Creed Shadows developers only found the confidence to rally against its loudest haters when Ubisoft realized we had to stop focusing on those who hated us. Like, let's be so for real, okay? The only people who hated anyone here were the people who pushed Shadows into becoming what it was in the first place. But the fact that GameFile and more reported this story that Yves Guillemot, that's the CEO of Ubisoft, who is somehow still at the company despite failing so terribly, that tells me everything. That this guy, according to GameFile, released some video at a conference apparently that isn't being publicly shared as of now anyways, but according to them it has professional voice acting and is a short 180-so-second video where Ubisoft is rallying its employees to stand up to the backlash. And this just tells me that Ubisoft, despite losing billions of dollars in value over the years, has frankly learned nothing. And I actually can't believe that Tencent would even let them share such a clip like this in the first place. And this is what I mean when I say that the East is abandoning the West, because these Western studios are being held together by duct tape at this point. They're making games for nobody but themselves, and they're selling fewer copies with every release. Just go look at The Outer Worlds and Obsidian, for example. But how Ubisoft can pretend to be some proud warrior standing up to the hordes is kind of insane to me. You got bought out by Chinese investors who used their pocket change, which was worth more than your entire company, to save you from shutting down completely this year alone. How are you able to sit there confidently and then believe that anyone who has allowed this ship to hit this many icebergs should think that it's a good idea to speak on the culture at Ubisoft? Shadows was not a misfire, okay? It was a catastrophic implosion of a decade's worth of poor decisions, sparking the hull of the ship that was laced with explosive material that everyone forgot about apparently. Like, Ubisoft used to be able to sell an average of 10 million copies of any given Assassin's Creed game with ease. The fact that Shadows, again from what I was told, wasn't even able to hit 6 million units in sales because they had to use players as their metric internally because the actual sales were lower is baffling to me, which I will prove later on in this video, by the way. And maybe people will say I'm lying again, even though every single thing I've said about Shadows from what Ubisoft employees have told me behind the scenes was true is crazy. That this is not a company that can be left to decide its own future. I mean, it isn't, obviously, since Tencent is now controlling them, but this comes off as tone deaf either way. GameFile did release parts of what the video said via text, and it's just baffling, dude. Here's how this video Ubisoft shared privately started. It said, "What happens when a legendary franchise reveals one of its most anticipated experiences?" The video begins, only to become the game everyone loves to hate. I don't know, Ubisoft. It clearly became a financial disaster that couldn't even sell half of Black Flag despite being the most expensive Assassin's Creed project of all time. And it sold so poorly, you guys use players instead of sales as an in-house metric on your own tracking systems to save face. It's embarrassing, man. I've seen it. Listen to how tone deaf this one part of this trailer then said this. "We had to stop focusing on those who hated us. We had to start firing up our allies." You mean Tencent, which has been circling you guys like sharks for years, just waiting to devour you whole, which they did coincidentally following the release of Assassin's Creed Shadows. Those allies, you guys can't be serious. They then say this, "We were initially surprised by the extent of the attacks," Yves Guillemot said, "and we quickly realized that it was a battle with our fans to demonstrate that we were in fact more of a video game than a message." Well, that's a lie, isn't it? Because you filled Shadows with propaganda. You had Akechi Mitsuhide on his knees telling Yasuke that he was the greatest samurai in Japan despite only being in Japan for 10 months at the time. The same Akechi who historically caught Yasuke and exiled him from Japan for the rest of his time in real life, by the way. And the same game where Yasuke can bed the mother of Japan of all people, and the same game where Naoe, your so-called female shinobi, which was historically proven to never have existed as a concept as well, because female shinobis were never historically historically accurate to Japan, and you know that, Ubisoft. The term for female shinobi was kuno-ochi, and it was, as even Wikipedia details even here, as a fabrication. It was, as they state here, created by Japanese novelist Futaro Yamada and was something he created for his Ninpo Hakkaden series of books, a complete fabrication. Like they even say, as I highlighted here, okay, although kuno-ichi have appeared in numerous creative works including novels, TV dramas, movies, and manga, Mie University historians have concluded that there were no historical records of female ninja performing reconnaissance and subversive activities in the same manner as their male counterparts. Although they do try to cope near the end there, but regardless, the concept of a female ninja never existed in real life. Yet despite this, Naoe's main villain in her side of Shadow's story, which I beat the game by the way and reviewed it for the channel in case you somehow don't know. But anyways, Naoe's main villain of all people is Hattori Hanzo, an actual legendary shinobi assassin that genuinely existed during the period in which Shadows takes place, and instead of making Hanzo the assassin you play as, which would have at least been 100% the logical choice if we're both going to play someone historically that made sense in that setting over someone like Yasuke, since Hanzo was again a master ninja in real life and your game is literally called Assassin's Creed, so it would have worked perfectly, but instead, he's even recorded, by the way, to be one of the greatest ninjas to ever live. They just made him the villain for Naoe because he's a man, I guess. And now the entire game's plot is a humiliation ritual, and it's really no wonder why Ubisoft, again, on what your employees have showed me, that you barely reached 2 million active users at release. And actually, by June 2025, your numbers ended up dropping to around 1 million active users. That's in your data, and you know I'm telling the truth, Ubisoft, because you know I know. And then by October 2025, your numbers were so well below even your lowest estimates for daily active users. I know you won't admit this, but your own employees have shown and told me this. I don't want to hear about how you stood up to the players or something and try to make it sound as if it's meant to be seen in a positive light. You fools destroyed your goodwill and ruined one of Western gaming's biggest franchises because you wanted to own the chuds. But all you ended up doing was owning yourselves, and now foreign investors control you, and Eves is nothing but a puppet that's being paraded on stage by Tencent. Like, it's ridiculous. It's so embarrassing to see. And like I said, I'll show you actual sales numbers. So Tech4Gamers confirms using Alinea Analytics data as seen here that Shadows sold only 4.3 million units so far from release, which means based on what I was told, that means roughly 1.7 million people ended up playing Shadows additionally via Ubisoft subscription, but they didn't buy the game. But that then brings the total number of players pretty much up to right now to 6 million players as of this video. Not in the future, okay? Someone tries to say anything, as of this video being made. But now that we know that only 4.3 million people were actually paying customers and considering the budget of Shadows, this is frankly catastrophic. Let's say hypothetically that if every copy of Shadows was sold at full price at $70, which I know probably isn't the case, but for the sake of argument, if we then multiply that by 4.3 million, we then reach $303 million before taxes and sales for Shadows, which is less than its entire budget. That doesn't even include its marketing budget, which was even more. So that is, yes, bafflingly bad. They pretty much made zero profit on the game, as in nothing. And I'm not even kidding. No wonder Tencent had to jump in and save them, because they spent years making a game that only accomplished growing their debt more than anything else, which then makes this whole "we're gonna make an audio clip rallying against our fans" even more bizarre. If you lost hundreds of millions of dollars, why would you believe it would be in your best interest to then villainize your consumer base even more? Like, did Tencent even sign off on this? They can't be serious. Now that we know the game did horribly and made pretty much zero profit, this next part of what Ubisoft said in their video to their haters comes off even more baffling, okay? Ubisoft said this: fans came back, conversation started shifting, and everyone who built, played, and loved this game could be proud again. With our allies beside us, we found confidence again to stand tall, to take risks, to speak up even against the loudest. Fans came back. No, they didn't. Not even half of them did. How were these people allowed to even okay these sorts of messages before publishing them? Like, how did they not know that this would bite them back twice as hard when the facts would come out? The only thing that changed is that you're now owned by Tencent and you no longer have your own, I guess, freedom. Like, this is so embarrassing, man. Look how they massacred Assassin's Creed, dude. The best case forward is to ensure that Ubisoft does not have in any way say in the future of Assassin's Creed and that Tencent just takes full control. But if Tencent did okay this message, this shows me that nobody there has learned anything from this catastrophic failure. And this is exactly why Square Enix is pulling out of the West, because of stuff like this. Imagine thinking that you own the chuds by admitting publicly, actually, we made zero zero money and are now millions of dollars in debt. But it's fine because it was worth it to own the haters. Like, okay, cool. I hope it was worth decimating all of your goodwill then. But let's circle back to Square Enix now because I want to prove something, okay? Square has been getting ruined by their Western sensibilities. We've known this for years already. However, unlike Ubisoft over there ruining their image with every single move they take, we have to admit at least that Square Enix still has their legacy, and I can prove that too, because you all know Magic the Gathering, I assume. The playing cards, but anyway, specifically, but earlier this year, Square Enix did a Magic the Gathering crossover with Final Fantasy. They released those cards, and as GameSpot reported this year, back in July 2025, this collaboration sold out in a single day. So how much money did those sets make in a single day? Well, look here, this Final Fantasy Magic set made $200 million in revenue in a single day, and I'm not kidding. They made 2/3 of what Assassin's Creed Shadows made on playing cards, no less. From the Final Fantasy brand recognition alone, one of the people involved got interviewed on how insanely popular these Magic cards for Final Fantasy became. They said this: "We couldn't produce enough. I think we increased production runs on it 4 times pre-release. It was substantially by many, very high double-digit percentages ahead of any other production run we've ever done, and we left the market wanting more." The reason why I'm bringing up how these Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering cards sold, it's so simple, dude. I can't even speak right. I'm just mad, dude. It proves that Final Fantasy at its core still has the pull to entice people to buy these games or items that feature their art. The point is that Square Enix can still turn this around. After all, the Dragon Quest series is still one of Square's best sellers, almost always, and for good reason. They are classic in their identity. They adhere to what Japanese games should be, and that's why they sell. They don't chase trends like Ubisoft does. Look at Dragon Quest III Remake from last year as seen here. It sold ahead of expectations via GameRant. The point I'm making is simple here, guys. When Square Enix adheres to what made them popular in the first place, I mean old school traditional JRPGs, they do extremely well. But whenever they've pandered to Western sensibilities like Forspoken, The Avengers, Tomb Raider, and more, what happened to all of them? They all ended up being massive failures, and they had to even sell off studios to make up for the costs. The realization here that we should all be coming to is that Square Enix and companies like them that are not situated in the West, they all seem to have the same problem, which is they have a Western problem. Why do you think Capcom is selling like crazy? Why From Software always does well? Why almost always it's the Eastern games that do considerably better than their Western counterparts these days? Just go look at Nintendo and their first-party offerings. Black Myth Wukong was the wake-up call, and since then, the East has been delivering banger after banger for a reason. This is the time to realize that what makes these sorts of games great is because they are not Western made. And what Ubisoft has proven more than anything is to be another wake-up call, if you will, to show places like Square Enix, Capcom, and more exactly what not to do when faced with criticism. Because you are companies that make video games, you should not under any circumstances believe that it's a good idea to belittle or attack your fans. For God's sakes, again, your Magic cards sold almost as much as a mainline Assassin's Creed game. Think about that for a second. Why did those cards sell? Oh, right. Because they featured classic art from the games that made you guys famous in the first place. I guarantee you, if they did a Magic the Gathering Dragon Quest thing too, that would sell like hotcakes as well. Or Kingdom Hearts, insane amount of money made probably there too. And now you're shedding that Western weight by removing the localizers who celebrated political divides and whoever else. And while I'm not cheering that people lost their jobs, what I am saying is that what's happening here is cause and effect. Pretty much whatever Ubisoft thinks is a good idea, it's an even greater idea then to do the opposite of what Ubisoft thinks almost every single time. Obviously, this also ties into the fact that as VGC reports here that Square is planning to replace quality assurance jobs with AI. This, I don't know if that will work if I'm being honest, because QA is your last bastion between knowing if the game that you're making is going to be good enough to resonate with audiences. However, if the QA is kept in Japan and adheres to their sensibilities, I would prefer that over some Western QA playing, say, the next Final Fantasy game and going, you know what, this isn't enough diversity or gender in this game or something stupid like that does not matter at all. At the end of the day, what Square Enix needs to survive is to double down on their Japanese roots. Stop chasing Western AAA slop trends, because it's clearly not working, and it's clear people just want that classic JRPG feel again. Ubisoft over there is the poster child of what happens when a company chases what they think is important in a Western sense. And now they've lost almost all mobility, and Tencent owns them. So unless Square Enix wants to inevitably also be absorbed by Tencent or something else one day, they too need to buckle down and give people what they want, or those layoffs will continue and they will eventually also come to Japan too. And then it'll be a dark day if Square Enix goes under eventually, so I hope that doesn't happen. But what do you think about all of this? Has the exodus of Eastern power from Western studios been a good thing? What sorts of games would you rather have more of, East or West? Is Square Enix right to pull out of the West, and was Ubisoft right to attack fans despite sales failing? Let me know in the comments. As always, thanks for watching, subscribe, see you next time, and Square Enix, for God's sakes, remember, those cards sold $200 million day one in 2025. You have to double down on the classics. Let's hope they listen to what I'm saying, but goodbye for now.